Hello, this is Dr. B. I appreciate you stopping by. We thought it might be helpful if we provide an audio series based on the book Speak Softly, Love Loudly, Uncommon Sense for Raising Healthy and Successful Kids. So, stand by. Let's get to it.
Introduction. An awesome calling. Hey, the way I figure it is this. If the kids are still alive by the time my husband comes home, I've done my job. Roseanne. Fortunately for our children, we set our sights a bit higher than does Roseanne. Let's face it, we choose to aim higher for a reason. We love our kids. Our wish is to protect, provide for, and nurture them. We want them to have the best and experience success. Many of us want our children to have it better than we did and to avoid our mistakes. While we hope for the best, we also consider the worst. We struggle to guide them to make good choices and to avoid the pain that accompanies bad ones. The thought of our children suffering sends cold chills through most of us. Fortunately, the right tools in the hands of a loving parent can help build a future for a child that other parents can only dream of. Unfortunately, our children live in a very complicated world. They're pounded by a world full of sexuality, violence, music with the wrong message, lack of respect for others, selfishness, and the worship of possessions. Children face incredible choices. The cost of these modern distractions is often overwhelming. The price can be self-destruction, frustration, and doing injury to others. In our society, it is all too easy to become discouraged. Many turn to and use drugs, fall into the trap of promiscuous sex, squander money, or otherwise live a life of dissatisfaction. Worldly temptations continually beg to be tasted. Only later do they reveal their horrible consequences. The result is a sour belly and rotting brain. For these reasons, good parenting isn't an option, it is a must. A parent must take on the guise of a watchful fox, ready to pounce on any threats to its little ones. An attitude to devour whatever might injure our children must be maintained. Add to this the wisdom of an owl. It requires tremendous insight and know-how to grow our children with the healthy attitudes and skills needed to succeed in a world full of threats and temptations. Constant guidance is needed to equip them to make the choices that will lead to happy, healthy lives. Our goal as parents is not only to be the protectors of our children, but to safely allow them to explore and build upon their interests and abilities. Such self-expression and experimentation allows them to soar towards their full potentials. All these considerations result in a heavy burden for parents. Because reaching a balance is not easy, we need only to look away from our children for a short time to turn back and realize that they are in trouble. Trouble in school, in their relationships, the way they deal with stress and emotion, or simply the way they make decisions can easily happen. Parenting is no place for fools or cowards. It should be reserved for heroes. Knowing what to do, how to do it, and having the courage to act is the formula for raising confident and healthy kids. While even the simplest of department store devices comes with a description of how to care for it, what is most precious to us does not. Children do not come with an instruction manual. As we all know, raising healthy children is much more complicated than cleaning that new coffee maker, and far more important. So what makes the difference between a confident, healthy, and successful child and one who seems confused or lost in the world? The truth of the answer lies within us. We have the power to make the difference. How do we do it? The difference requires raising our children with some uncommon sense. Chapter 1. The Burden. Raising Kids. Before I was married, I had 6 theories about raising children. Now I have 6 children and no theories. John Wilmot, the Earl of Rochester. There was an ancient king who prided himself on his knowledge and cunning. He had power and fame and all that his kingdom possessed. Yet he envied one man in his kingdom more than any other, a man known for his wisdom. The self-righteous king's jealousy nagged at him day after day. Finally, he reached a point when all that he could think about was this man. The king had a need to demonstrate his superiority, so he devised a plan. He summoned the wise man, who quickly came as his sovereign had commanded. As the wise man approached the throne, the king extended his arm to show that he was holding something in his hand. He held a small, delicate bird. The king then asked the wise man, "Tell me, is the bird alive, or is it dead?" The king thought to himself that if the wise man said alive, he would then crush the tiny creature with one squeeze of his hand. Alternatively, if the wise man replied dead, the king would simply open his hand, allowing the bird to fly free as it pleased. Before answering, the wise gentleman peered into the king's eyes and considered the question. With a slight pause, only a brief hesitation, he glanced at the king's hand. The wise man responded, "My king, you who are so great and powerful, the fate of the bird lies within your grasp." The way a child grows and matures is to a great extent held in our hands. We have the choice of hanging on too tightly and smothering, or holding too loosely and them crashing to the ground. It is so much easier to have a child than it is to be a balanced parent. The complicated nature of our society and the ease with which our children can get into deep waters puts them at the risk of quickly being pulled under. The possibility of them getting in over their heads is a constant threat. Parents are challenged with protecting their children from music that debases women and glorifies violence and suicide, from pornography on the internet, and pressure to experiment with sex or drugs. Society itself has taught selfish philosophies and the lack of respect and caring for others. Raising a child these days is no easy task. The world we live in creates too many dilemmas and choices for both parents and their children. Those choices tend to mold and shape lives by creating consequences and directing attitudes as well as actions. Parents are continually pressed with the question of how to protect their children while not stifling their normal development, as well as self-expression. When to hold on tightly and when to let go are questions that weigh heavily on a caring parent's heart. This weight is a particular burden when it comes to discipline and allowing for more and more independence. It is often tempting to hold on too tightly through fear or need for control. This tactic results in such restriction that a child is not permitted to breathe and grow. A child can become resentful or feel incapable of dealing with life without someone else making decisions for him or her. The other temptation for parents is to give a child too much freedom and control by letting them fly on their own before they are ready. Children are often unprepared emotionally and psychologically for the consequences of such freedom. In these circumstances, a child's control will usually result in poor relationships, selfishness, self-doubt, confusion, and frustration. Wisdom in parenting is needed more these days than at any other time. The temptations and pulls on our children are greater than ever. Our sense of control and influence can leave us feeling inadequate. In spite of these conditions, we must not relinquish our rights or responsibilities as parents. Rather, we must enforce and create healthy boundaries while expressing love and concern for our children. Both love and boundaries are necessary. One without the other will not work. A healthy balance between freedom and restrictions involves calculated risks along with clear and reasonable expectations. This balance should then be reinforced by positive and negative consequences. Children will more readily accept limits and rules if they feel loved and accepted by their parents. There needs to be enough freedom to explore and grow within parental guidelines. This task is an ongoing struggle for most parents. Children want increasing freedom. However, they are frequently not being prepared for that freedom, or they want to deny the responsibility that goes along with it. Parents have a responsibility as they allow their children to have increased freedom. The level of freedom should match their children's ability to meet increased responsibilities. This is real life. The increased freedom of choice is paralleled with heightened responsibility. Often the consequences get larger for choices as well. A 6-year-old riding their bike into a ditch doesn't bear the same consequences as a 16-year-old driving a car into a tree. Freedom with its accompanying expected responsibility is what they will gradually experience on their own in the real world. The hows, whens, and whys of practicing such a balance of protecting and letting go provides for the making of healthy children. These considerations provide good boundaries and loving discipline that in turn helps to maintain such a balance. How should I as a parent handle this situation? When is the time right to let go a little more of my child? Why am I setting the boundaries that I am setting? These questions must all relate to the goal of protection while still allowing for growth. One day every child will have to face the world on their own. Balance is the means of reaching this goal. If there is difficulty maintaining such a balance, then change is needed in our approach to raising our children. This change must begin with the recognition that something isn't working. Such an admission requires courage. That courage must be matched with the knowledge of how to proceed, inspiration to keep us going, and finally, continued effort. Ultimately, this formula can bring to pass what is needed. What is needed is the emergence of a healthy, self-confident, respectful, and capable young person. Healthy parenting indeed requires uncommon sense. The basics. Parenting can be very confusing. There's no such thing as a perfect child or a perfect parent. There isn't even such a thing as a perfect expert on parenting. However, this book is written from the perspective of a parent combined with the training and experience of a seasoned professional. The book is written from one parent to others because we all want to be better parents. Unfortunately, it is true that we all make mistakes from time to time. However, we need to try to make as few of them as possible. The better parents we become, the healthier the children we tend to grow. Parenting involves a process. It is a journey full of elation and heartache, speckled with both wisdom and folly. We need to learn from our mistakes and be prepared to change our tactics, especially as our children get older. There's no excuse for being lazy when it comes to guiding our children. Ultimately, children, society, and parents will pay a very high price for a lack of diligence and inaction. It has been said that there are 3 kinds of people in the world. Let's extend this to say that there are 3 kinds of parents. There are those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who wonder what happened. We need to be in the first group. We should make good things happen in the lives of our children. Lack of attention and activity is not the same as being neutral. The merry-go-round of childhood does not stop just because we weren't paying attention. This merry-go-round too often shifts direction, hesitates, and stutters, and can feel like it's going backwards. Childhood isn't always merry. Life for our children goes on with movement and in some direction. Inevitably, our children will eventually do something that will demand our action and attention, even if we don't want to give it. The lack of positive attention received by a child will not go unnoticed. Usually, a child's continued need for attention will result in them doing something that forces us to get involved. They can create a crisis or simply be defiant. A child's need for attention remains the same whether or not they receive attention. That bucket will eventually be filled up one way or another. A child who dips into the waters of caring and attentive parents will draw up sweet refreshment to fill their belly. Whether or not we choose to meet this need for interaction and attention, the attention bucket will get filled. If parents don't provide what's needed, the bucket will be dipped somewhere else, possibly in some cesspool drawing forth ugly muck and stench. But one way or another, children will have their drink, and they drink deeply. Pray that they don't look for attention in the lap of drugs, the arms of sex, or the hands of those who would abuse them. Parenting is possibly the most rewarding, but also the most challenging job in the world. The emotional, psychological, and social outcomes can be wondrous or devastating. It is an awesome responsibility. Failure as a parent doesn't mean failure just for the parent. Beyond failing ourselves, we also fail our child and God, as well as society. If we succeed, we bless another person whom we greatly love, as well as enrich all that they will ever touch with their lives. To be a strong parent, it is necessary to see and overcome life's complications. Complications. Society is ever-changing, and so are our kids' tastes. Children expect to have what all their friends have, or more accurately, what they think they have. These expectations include having everything from freedom to the latest clothes. They don't realize that these trends usually start with 1 or 2 people deciding to do something different. Later, others see the change, and they've got to have the same to feel they fit in. Of course, these fads often fade from the scene as quickly as they appeared. However, this reality is insignificant to a child, who sees a new style of shoe worn by popular peers as necessary for survival in their class. The change could be a certain brand of jeans, a tattoo, or even body piercing. They want what the others have. Children want to be included and considered cool. The complication for them is that they want to be unique and seen as special as well. Teenagers want cars, clothes, and money. Due to the resources of our society, these things have been easily available in the past. Parents, generally wanting things to be better or easier for their children, have often given excessively, with few strings attached. Too often the lack of strings or conditions has resulted in children not learning responsibility, appreciation, and the need for self-sacrifice. Accompanying the availability of money and material things is the fact that children have been and are exposed to too much too early. Children view violent and frightening television programs and movies. This entertainment can be particularly devastating for young children who have not yet clearly learned the difference between reality and fantasy. This lack of understanding is one of the reasons that so many young children have nightmares. Frightening images they are exposed to by scary movies prompt thoughts of monsters under the bed, abductions, killing, and vicious animals in the closet. A child viewing a horror program or even an advertisement for one during their waking hours doesn't define their viewing as a Hollywood production, representing actors all made up and special effects departments at work. They often experience the images as real and think of the possibility of horrible things happening to them or their loved ones. They incorporate those images into their thoughts and into their dreams with a frightening result. This fear can also be felt by teens. However, they will hesitate to admit it, seeing the admission of fear as weakness. This is especially true if their friends have seen the same movie. Kids are also flooded with sexual messages, whether it is through magazines, MTV, or ads they see on television. Every form of media, from newspapers to the evening news and popular talk shows, send these messages. These sensual messages are logged in minds and are carried into our schools. This fact is one of the reasons why children are getting involved sexually so early. It is no longer shocking to hear of children being involved with sex at or before the age of 13. A sad fact of life is children having children. It has become an epidemic. Babies are a natural byproduct of sex. There have been too many recent reports of little girls having children as early as age 11. This phenomenon is one of babies having babies. Children are not equipped emotionally, nor do they have the maturity to make responsible decisions about relationships and their sexual behavior. They often ignore the fact that one brief sexual encounter can affect them and others for the rest of their lives. Consequences take the forms of pregnancy, emotional dependency, lack of self-respect, or sexually transmitted disease. The statistics for sexually transmitted diseases being carried by ignorant teenagers is astounding. Some research indicates that as much as 40% of the teens that are sexually active are infected with some form of sexually transmitted disease. Children are both blessed and cursed by the money they can get a hold of. They have buying power with cash in their hands. Money means being able to get and do things, even things that are self-destructive. Automobiles and transportation provide more opportunities to go places and get into more trouble. This fact is reminiscent of a flock of chickens seen near a highway. They had gotten out of the farmer's chicken coop. They seemed to relish their newfound freedom and were happy clucking and pecking their way towards the nearby highway. The group was oblivious to the dangers that lie ahead, so they just kept going until several of them found themselves under the tires of speeding automobiles. Children need protection from being squashed under the tires of life as it speeds by. Excessive freedom breeds danger. Too often it results in disaster, much too high a price for our children to pay. Society has also fired a barrage of messages through its legal system, as well as the media concerning violence. Messages that violence is okay and will solve problems are seen as a tempting possibility that many children often grab. This philosophy can be especially tantalizing to teenagers during those frustrating, rebellious, and self-searching years. The flood of violence on television, in music, and through the movies has desensitized our young people, not to mention adults. The real effect of aggression gets lost. Just because someone gets killed on a Saturday night show and then turns up on a Sunday afternoon movie doesn't mean that that is the way real life operates. Bullets really do kill, knives really do cut, and people don't come back from the dead. But there are many forms of violence short of killing. Everyday violence is acted out in the classrooms and hallways of our schools. Even our neighborhoods have become unsafe. Bullying, threats, and outright violence are all too common. Freedom without maturity and information without understanding can lead to some disturbing results. On top of this violent trend is the fact that there has not been an effort by society to train our children to have respect for authority or elders. Too often the young disdain the old and flaunt themselves before the authority of police, principals, teachers, and others. So why should we be surprised that so many children disrespect their parents? Self-restraint is learned by morality taught by parents and adequate consequences leveled by their society. These problems all speak of needed values and what many children have devoured. Over time, they become what they consume. The media have set before our children a meal of rotting eggs and rancid meat. Is it any wonder that we see them vomit up such atrocious attitudes? The influence of violence, sex, and disrespect is one more battle that parents must fight and need to win. Too many clouds of threat hover over our children. Paying attention. As parents, we need to give guidance to our children and know how they spend their time and who and what they are involved in. We should allow for choices, but only within reasonable boundaries. How can we allow for choices within reasonable boundaries if we don't know what is going on with our kids? One way of managing choices is to provide a number of choices, but within reasonable limits. This balance involves spelling out what those possible choices are and then letting the child decide within these limits. A simple example would be, what are you going to wear to school tomorrow? The choices are contained within the closet and not outside. Choices could be made by going to a store and purchasing new clothes, or by digging through the garbage can where inappropriate clothing has been disposed of. Reaching into siblings' dressers or parents' drawers should not be permitted. The choices must be made from the possibilities offered. The boundary was set as choosing from their own closet. Another way of managing choices that is especially effective is the illusion of choice. This approach is very appropriate regarding discipline and personal responsibility. Illusion refers to the appearance of choice and the ability to save face. For example, suppose a child is told to pick up the clothes in their room. They begin stalling or are becoming resistant. The choice is given them: you can either pick up your clothes, or you can miss out on watching television tonight. The message remains that the job needs to be done, or there will be consequences. However, there is some appearance of choice in the mind of the child. This tactic can also be helpful in power struggles. The true message is: make the right choice or pay the consequences. Of course, there are also times when choices are not possible, or that there is too great a danger to a child to offer choices. These are the times when we as parents need to slam the door shut and answer with a firm no. For example, a teenager asks to travel 2 hours to some party with people they don't know. They want to be out late, and there will be no responsible parental supervision. The situation is not one for compromise. It requires an automatic no. Teenagers seem skilled at finding themselves in this type of complicated situation. Another complicating factor for today's parents is the difficulty in identifying the normal family. Even if we could identify the normal family, would normal also mean healthy? For the most part, the traditional two-parent family is a thing of the past. Just as people no longer stay 30 years in the same job, they also often create different families. If there are two parents in the household, often there are other parents involved as well. Divorce and death create these situations. More parents being involved spreads out parental influence among more people, complicating child loyalties and making it difficult to raise them. The beauty of a child being in a stable, two-parent household is that parents can support each other and don't have to continually take the full burden of parenting on themselves. They can take some well-needed breaks. Also, two parents are a lot more difficult for a challenging child to overcome than just one. This is one of the reasons why it is so important for parents that are together to work together, and that the children see this happening. Parents who stay together and look out for their children deserve special recognition. Unfortunately, a large number of parents have to parent alone. The opportunity or ability to work with the other parent simply doesn't exist. They are either completely responsible for raising their children, or there is very little input on the part of the other parent. At times, the other parent can work against what one parent is trying to accomplish. These parents are left with nearly the complete burden of raising their children on their shoulders. Parents in this position need to be given tremendous respect and should be supported by the rest of society. They are often the mothers, and sometimes the fathers, who are trying to be two parents at once. They attempt to cover all the bases in the midst of their exhaustion and frustration, while often feeling inadequate to the task. They often struggle with guilt. It still boggles the mind how one parent can manage the difficult job of parenting alone and still survive. This effort often comes with a lack of sleep and appreciation on the part of their children. These parents do so much for their kids, and so often their sacrifices are overlooked. In addition to single parents, who are deserving of respect, there are also many grandparents who are now taking care of their children's children. This situation often occurs by default due to their ill or irresponsible adult children. They become parents again, having to shift the focus of their lives and lifestyle. Their dreams and goals for their later years or for retirement are usually dropped in order to take care of young children again. Sometimes they must parent teenagers. There are special rewards in heaven for these folks. Children are meant to be born when their parents are young and have the energy that's needed. Then there is also the category of the substitute parents. These might be aunts and uncles or foster parents, or sometimes even neighbors, who have stepped in to take care of children who are technically not their responsibility. Nonetheless, out of love and concern, they have taken the burden of raising someone else's children on themselves. This is yet another group of people who need a medal of honor. They are a group of people who often have to deal with the legal frustrations of not having custody or the power to protect and make decisions for these children for lack of a blood tie. However, they are left with the mantle of responsibility. The system makes it harder to effectively raise these children. These adults often have little control over visitations or health care. Many times they don't even know how long a child might be staying with them. However, they continue to invest themselves and provide the best home they can. Next, we find the special category of blended families and step-parents. These folks face particularly difficult challenges because so often there are loyalties and values on the part of the children that conflict with the acceptance of a new parent or anyone new in their family. Overlapping issues of accepting a new parent is the matter of mixing children from two different families into a new family. Children who have already developed their sense of values, likes, dislikes, and loyalties, who have their own individual personalities, often feel rushed into becoming a different family. The situation can create feelings of irritation, frustration, and confusion. These things are difficult for children. Sometimes the change includes a different home or school. Kids are often required to adjust to new situations when they have not yet accepted and grieved over their past. The difficulty of accepting the changes often wrings itself out in the murky water of challenging authority, being unhappy, and disobedience. Parents in these situations, who work hard to successfully blend their families, deserve a lot of credit. So often it is like mixing oranges and apricots, and trying to produce applesauce. Not an easy task, and one requiring incredible diligence. Furthermore, the problems of divorce go far beyond single parents or blended families with step-parents. Often they involve multiple sets of parents or step-parents due to multiple divorces. This factor multiplies relationship difficulties that sometimes are not easily calculated. Loyalties and affections can become tattered, torn, and confused, especially if conflict remains between the adults. Therefore, no matter how we slice it, the pie of parenting is often a messy one. Sometimes it emerges from the oven with burnt crust and dripping gobs of goo. As pieces are pulled from the pie, the situation becomes even messier. Sometimes the results are sweet and sometimes sour. Many times, parents are never quite sure what they are going to come away with. Expectations. Before parenthood, there were thoughts of how children would respond to an adult. The expectations were: 1. Tell them what to do and they will cheerfully do it. 2. Correct them and they will see the error of their ways. 3. Sacrifice for them and they will show appreciation in return. 4. Exercise authority and they will bow to superior wisdom. 5. Finally, children would accept no as an answer. As a parent, reality forced a change in expectations. In other words, it was a cold, hard slap in the face. Children don't always cheerfully do what they are told to do. What a shock! Correcting them doesn't always result in them seeing that they have done anything wrong. Sacrificing for them often doesn't result in any show of appreciation. In fact, sometimes just the opposite occurred. They wanted more. It was also realized that having age and wisdom didn't mean that children always agree. They won't automatically bow to superior wisdom. We don't even need to talk about a child naturally accepting no for an answer. Reality forced a change of focus, a shift from unrealistic expectations to accepting reality for what it is. Expectations need to be realistic and grounded in reality. Otherwise, both child and parent will be set up for a lot of aggravation. With this attitude in mind, how do we influence and raise healthy children? First, let's compare 4 different parenting styles.